When a new MCU movie emerged in the cinemas, we did what we often do. We squabbled over it. Reviewers rushed in to claim it as their own, posting reviews to exploit the engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Captain America: Brave New World.
Hello everyone, welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So today we're going to be discussing or debating Captain America: Brave New World. But you already know what time it is. Movie recommendation time. So, Mandem, what is the best recent thing that you've seen?
I watched One of Them Days. It's a comedy film starring Keke Palmer. It's your kind of typical dumb fun movie where you've got these two people who have missed their rent payment for whatever reason. One of the girls gave the rent money to her homeless boyfriend, who then kind of misused the money or whatever. And then you just kind of follow them along on this journey where they need to somehow find a way to collect the rent money within 12 hours. And pretty much it's just a series of like them just ending up in dumb situations. It's some of it's like pretty funny. Some of it's you kind of like roll your eyes to it and it's like, okay, whatever. But a lot of it's like pretty funny. It's a little bit like outrageous, kind of like over the top type thing. But it just kind of gave me the same feelings of watching, movies like Friday from back in the day, movies like Friday, Menace to Society. What's the other one? It's like things like Friday After Next and stuff like that. It was just kind of like a good kind of throwback type of movie in that sense, where you just kind of like spending a day in the hood, basically, just kind of running around, interacting with like pretty interesting characters, and just having some type of dumb fun with it. So that's my movie recommendation.
Cool. I'm gonna go and check that one out. I was supposed to check out another film called, I think it was called Heart or something. It's like a horror Valentine's movie, but I didn't get to watch that, so I'm gonna watch that too. The film that I watched, it was actually a Netflix movie called Your Son. The main actor is the guy that was on that's the main actor in Wrong Side of the Tracks, a Spanish series. This one's a Spanish movie as well. This was actually it was a good film. It was a nice cinema popcorn movie. Basically, his son's beaten up, gets brutally beaten up actually. And then the dad kind of goes on a journey trying to kind of like seek justice and get justice on the perpetrators. So, and there's like a big revelation at the end where it's like, oh, I was not expecting that. And the way that it ends as well wasn't expected, and it was kind of like not justified but understandable why he did what he did, but at the same time it's like, whoa, that's pretty effed up. So it was a nice Netflix movie. It came out 2018, so Netflix does have its hidden gems, man. I'd recommend this one. It was a good film. It was a good film.
So I watched The Gorge, which is a 2025 science fiction horror action romantic comedy, essentially about two snipers who fall in love while guarding opposite ends of a gorge full of plant zombies. So the idea is essentially that it's about these two guys, one working for the US government, one working for the Russian government, are essentially contracted to go to this remote place. They're not told where. And essentially there's a gorge. And on either side of that gorge is a watchtower. They're like these automated defenses. There are mines, there are drones, there are automated turrets. And their job essentially is for a year is to guard their side of the gorge to ensure that nothing gets out. And it turns out that there are monsters inside the gorge, and every once in a while they try to get out. The two people who are hired to do this essentially have nothing to do for a year but watch the gorge, right? And they're not supposed to talk to each other, they're not supposed to communicate. But they start communicating and they kind of develop this romance at first at a distance. And then later on they find out a way to cross the gorge and actually meet up in person. And so the first half of it is kind of this high concept, quirky romance story against this espionage, political thriller, monster story backdrop. So it kind of blends every genre pretty much together. And then in the second half, unfortunately, it turns into a bit of a generic CGI fest where they just fight some monsters. But the first half of it is actually quite charming and quite fun to watch. And there's like this gradual exploration of what this facility is and why it was built and why it was built this way. And that ties in with these two guards getting to know each other. It's got a cast of 3 people, essentially. And these 2 people really sell this whole idea of people who are lost and who thought they had nothing to lose, kind of finding each other in this absurd situation. And so the first half of it is actually quite good. Second half is kind of whatever. They kind of didn't have an idea for an ending and kind of just had to end it like a generic sci-fi horror movie. But just grading on a curve in terms of what the like streamers put out, I actually had a good time with it. And even the second half still has some wacky, ridiculous stuff in it that's actually kind of creative and kind of fun to watch. It just does not fulfill the promise of the first half, but I still recommend it because I actually had a good time. It wasn't as bad as a lot of these things are. A good idea can go a long way. Like, ultimately, you have to deliver. And I think it does. It delivers enough for it to be enjoyable. But it is a little bit frustrating that they never take the premise anywhere interesting in the end.
I saw the trailer to that and I was kind of reluctant to watch it. I haven't watched it yet. I'm gonna put on my watch list, but I was kind of reluctant because it felt very empty. Like, I don't have an issue with there just being like 3 cast members. You know what I'm saying? I don't have an issue with just being like 3 people in a movie. It was just like the world felt a bit too big for just having 3, like, you know, the film revolving around 3 people. Like, if it was like depending on what the setting was, because the setting was like against a monster, so I was thinking, okay, this is going to be one of those type of movies where it's, I don't know, just going to kind of feel not incomplete, but just there isn't really going to be much going on. So that's why I was a bit reluctant to watch it. But you know what I'm saying?
It's entirely the chemistry between these 2 people.
Oh, well.
And we do get a little bit of explanation in terms of who they are and why they are the way they are. And they're both kind of broken people who kind of, they sign up to live a year in the wilderness, right? With no contact to anybody. Like, most people would not do that. So it takes a certain kind of person to actually volunteer for that in the first place. But it's like the bulk of the movie is just the chemistry between these 2 people. And that's what makes it work.
Okay, guys, time for the main event. Captain America, Brave New World. Daniel, please give the people a synopsis.
So Captain America Brave New World is the newest entry in the MCU. It's kind of a sequel to multiple different MCU movies before it, in that it picks up a whole bunch of kind of open plot threads from previous movies and kind of tries to combine them, where fought or opposed the Hulk back in the very first MCU movie, who has now become president. And he's essentially tasked with becoming Captain America in an official capacity in a situation in which the Celestial who tried to hatch from the globe in Eternals has turned out to be super vibranium called adamantium that will solve all the world's problems. And so the idea is essentially that Ross, as the president, tries to pass this treaty that would allow the world to share the adamantium, essentially, without the need to go to war over it. And Captain America is drawn into that situation, and there's a conspiracy to kind of undermine that effort. And as Captain America always does, he goes rogue halfway through in order to do the right thing. And that's essentially the movie. So what did we think of Captain America Brave New World?
Firstly, the movie isn't, Daniel, you're right. When you said in the group chat, the movie isn't as bad as the world has made it seem. I think it's a typical Marvel film. And I think I kind of had like a similar issue that I had with Venom with this film. I think Act 3, for me, was the best act in this movie. And it should have been like that throughout. I do think that they were missing a compelling story, and I do understand like he is a side character, and we've seen him like throughout the kind of like Marvel storyline. However, I think with this one he was missing a story for me. So he kind of had the issue where his story wasn't kind of like built up, so it just kind of felt like I was just watching a superhero do his duty rather than being engaged in an actual his story. So he didn't do a bad job whatsoever. Like I said, Act 3 for me was like the best act. I think a lot was going on in that act, especially when the introduction of the Red Hulk. So I think there was a lot of emotion in that scene. Overall, I had a cool experience. I just think it was missing a compelling and engaging story, and I just think that Sam Wilson's Captain America was missing that story, and that they kind of should have used this movie to maybe just like how he came to be, if that makes sense. Even though we might have seen it before, but I don't really remember it also.
The biggest crime of this movie is the Falcon and the Winter Soldier TV show, and that's for 2 reasons. It kind of like took up explaining or going through the journey of Sam Wilson picking up the shield and dealing with the weight of that, and dealing with whether he's worthy enough to carry the shield, and whether he's accepted as a person that's carrying that shield. And it's explored in the TV show, and I feel like we could have completely X'd that out and given them that storyline in this movie, because there's a really good moment in here between Sam Wilson and Bucky where they're having a conversation, and he's kind of like explaining how he's different to Steve carrying the shield and what that symbolizes versus him and what that symbolizes. So I feel like that TV show kind of took away from that. It also took away from Isaiah Bradley's story as well, because it's explored in the TV show. And again, maybe not enough people have watched the TV show to then understand his significance in this movie in terms of him being a previous Captain America as well, that was then experimented on and had gone through such treacherous times with the government in terms of like how they handled him and stuff. And I feel like that could have added a little bit more understanding as to sort of his character and why Sam Wilson cared so much about him in this movie. So I feel like, firstly, that show just really took away from that. Secondly, this was just like so annoying because there was like so many good elements in here. I wouldn't even say good. There were so many elements in here that could have worked so much better to make the movie a lot more enjoyable. And that's not to say that I didn't enjoy the movie, because I feel like the reaction to it's been way overblown. And I feel like it's a very fine MCU movie. And I think there's a lot of other MCU movies that I can sort of rate below this. But things like how the political thriller aspect of this was unfolding, everything was too predictable, everything was too on the nose, everything was sort of over-explained. The villain was over-explaining his motivations and why he was doing what he was doing, which was really frustrating. It's like there should be an element of mystery and uncertainty as to kind of what's going on. I know everyone praised Harrison Ford for sort of his performance and his character in this. For me, it was a bit too not one-dimensional. It wasn't like there wasn't enough complexity to him as a character, and the whole thing about whether he's turned a new leaf, whether he's the same guy as before, whether he can be trusted. There wasn't enough complexity in there, especially for someone like Sam Wilson, who was locked up in a raft because of this man, because he was being hunted down, along with Steve Rogers and the others. There wasn't enough complexity to his character, and it was very simple, toned down. I'm trying to just be a better person for my daughter, basically. And for me, it didn't work. And then on top of that, for sort of the villain to be, my whole reason I'm doing this is so you don't look good in front of your daughter. It's a bit like, okay, it's like everything was like too on the nose and everything was like too in your face about why things were happening to that character and what that character was all about. So whilst I think his performance as Thunderbolt Ross is something good in this, it's just the actual like character and how the story unfolded just didn't work for me at all in this. That's like the main bulk of it, because like with how things were flowing, especially in like Act 1, I was kind of like on board with how things were progressing, and I was like waiting to get to the point where everyone hated it, because I was like, okay, everything's taken a logical step, everything makes sense, this is happening, then that's happening. The whole situation about the mind control and stuff like that was like like there's a lot of like small elements, or not even small elements. There's a lot of intricacies within the story, or plots and that just either don't make sense or are just maybe like over exaggerated. I'm gonna wrap this up and we can get to some of this in the spoiler section. But overall, it was very lackluster in how it handled its story and how it handled its characters in this. There was a lot of good elements in there that just were underdeveloped or not utilized properly. So for me, it's a fine entry into the MCU. It's not one that I like hate watching, but it misses the mark completely as to what made the great MCU movies great, basically, or what makes a great superhero movie great as well.
So for me, I think a lot of people are being negative on this movie just kind of to be negative because it's the newest MCU thing. I do think if I was just watching this movie on my own, I would simply say, movie's broken, please fix. It would be kind of my review. I've tried to make sense of this whole thing about the budgets and the reshoots, and there's lots of people claiming lots of things, and it's not entirely clear at this point, at the time we're recording this, what exactly the truth is. But I think what is clear is that this movie was reworked multiple times, and it's got pieces of at least 3 or 4 halfway decent MCU movies in this. The problem is it's all of those at the same time, and so none of them work together, and none of them really actually go very far to actually tell a compelling story. And in our videos leading up to this, I said, the thing that this has to do is to convince us that Sam Wilson has a story, and that not just that he can be Captain America, but that he is an interesting character in his own right. And I think on that level, the movie fails completely, because there are bits and pieces here. You can point to specific lines or scenes or speeches where they kind of try to convince you that this is what they're doing, but I don't believe that they are. That in large part is because the movie is cluttered up with loose threads from 20 years of MCU movies and trying to set a stage half-heartedly for what comes next. All of it kind of cannibalizes each other to the point where there is not very much compelling on a story or character level because it tries to do too many things all at once. And then on the spectacle front, I think it's quite bad. Like, especially if you're comparing this to Civil War and Winter Soldier, which being a Captain America movie, it's kind of inviting that comparison. I think it's embarrassing. I think it's like these action sequences are slow and clumsy and tired. There's very little in this where I was wowed. Very little where I said, "Oh, this is cool. This is creative." And by the time we got to the action spectacle in the very end, I kind of stopped caring because it hadn't been set up as something I should care about. And that, I think, is the real big sin of this movie, which is that because it does so many different things, each of which could be something, it ends up being nothing. But at the same time, it's a halfway competent movie. Like, all the actors involved try their best. Between the fragmented script and the editing and the plot overhauls, there's just not much they can do. I kind of feel for Anthonie Mackie a little bit because he's been trying for 10 years to make this character work and they just won't let him. So he's the last person I'm going to blame for this, but I think there is somebody to be blamed. So let's talk.
Was he responsible for the series?
Well, he's just an actor. Like, it's not his choice.
Oh, sorry. Oh, crap. I thought you were talking about the director. I didn't even know. I'm terrible with names. So when you said
no, the actor,
yeah.
The actor who plays Captain America,
he
does nothing wrong. Like, he really tries, and in all of these scenes, you can see him trying to make this work, and it just doesn't. And it's not even that bad. Like, I think the action sequences are quite mediocre. But I've seen worse, and I've seen worse character stuff even in MCU movies. But it's just not compelling. Like, if this is supposed to be, like, this is kind of the ultimate do-over movie, right? They rewrote this movie at least twice. I'm removing it based, like, this is supposed to be the political one, right? Not just because you've got a black Captain America fighting the president of the United States in this, and it does nothing with that premise, really. Everything about it is supposed to be the political smart one. But they're completely afraid to do anything. They're completely afraid to take a stance on anything in any way. And even, like, I think the most compelling stuff was like the plot fragment with Isaiah. There's actually something in this, and I think we're gonna get to that. But even that doesn't have room to breathe because it's just drowned out. Like, nothing rises above the 20% level. Like, nothing is allowed to take up more than 20% of the movie. And as a result, the movie can't be about it. So that's kind of what this all comes down to. It's just a whole pile of stuff. It's not really a movie. Like, if this was like season 2 of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it would be more okay because different episodes could be about different things. But here, a movie is meant to have a story, and this doesn't.
Back to your sort of first point about Sam Wilson not having any sort of real character in this. That's why I feel like the scene between him and Bucky was really frustrating, and it felt like it came out of nowhere because it didn't seem like we were building up to the point of people are admiring him because he hasn't taken the super soldier serum, and he's sort of meant to be someone that you kind of like aspire to because he's just like a normal guy that's like sort of taking on this like huge responsibility or whatever, whereas Steve Rogers was this symbol of hope. It really just felt like everything before that was just him kind of doing his duty and kind of doing the right thing by Isaiah Bradley, who was his friend essentially. And then you have that whole sort of speech by, I think his name is Ramirez, his psychic Falcon, at the end of the movie, where he's kind of going on this like big emotional spiel about looking up to sort of Falcon and sort of everything that he does, and like it makes him like I can't remember exactly like the words that he used, but I just felt like
I don't remember either because why would I?
Yeah, exactly. But I felt like those two moments are in a good movie where they've set up good character and they've set up good development of sort of guy that's sort of decided not to take the super soldier serum and is taking up this mantle or whatever and is sort of doing these amazing things or whatever, and we've got a well-crafted story. Those two moments could work. But in this movie, it just felt like it really came out of nowhere.
Let's drill into this, right? So first of all, I don't believe any of the speeches. I barely listened to them because I did not believe that they actually were anything. I think those were just inserted to make it seem as if something was going on. But okay,
Yeah.
so he's like, you make a big deal out of the fact that he's just a guy. He's not a super soldier. He did not take the serum. He even turned it down when he was offered it.
Mhm.
But he fights a Hulk. Okay, right? So that's issue number one. And in order to
Mhm.
make him fight the Hulk, they give him an indestructible armor made out of vibranium. So first of all, Captain America is wearing a foreign armor. If you're
Yeah.
gonna do this, it better be symbolic, right? And there
Mhm.
better be a point attached. And I think they just did it as a bookkeeping exercise to make him strong enough so that he can fight the villain and not be immediately paced.
He does show regretting that decision.
He
Because
said
he
as a
mentioned it a
joke,
couple of
though.
times.
He goes back and
It
forth.
said
As
it comes
initially he
as a joke.
says, maybe I should
But
have.
he did say it. I think he did say it with the. I don't know. Maybe I might be lying. Well, not intentionally, but didn't he say it during the conversation as well with Bucky? Yeah, didn't he say that to him as well? But maybe we should have taken this.
I honestly don't even remember. But
Yeah,
he's
he
in
did,
the
yeah.
fight against Hulk. He says Bucky's full of shit, essentially saying he should have taken the serum anyway.
Yeah.
Something like that, right? So here's just my thing, right? In our discussion of First Avenger, we talked about how the entire story is scaled to make Steve Rogers look good, right? Like everything about it is there to give Steve Rogers an opportunity to convince us that he is a hero and that he has a story and that he is a cool character. This movie does the exact opposite, right? It gives him a villain he can't fight, and in order to be able to fight him on a technicality, he gets equipment that negates his shtick, which is supposed to be the everyman, who's Captain America not because of what he is, but who he is, right? So it's again this whole thing of a good man versus a perfect soldier from First Avenger, right? But Sam Wilson is just a good man, right? That is why he is supposed to be a good Captain America. But the story does not revolve around vindicating that or showing that or enabling that. Like the entire thing is just misguided from the start. And I think that is like kind of the first issue with this movie, right? That they did not pick, like, if this was just about the Serpent Gang or whatever they're called, and this was just guys with guns and a gimmick, then actually it could have been the right thing, right? Where you could have constructed a story in which Sam Wilson's specific personality and skills were the key to defeating the Serpent Gang, Serpent Squad, whatever they're called, right? Like they used to be in this, right? And you can see like set photos where they actually have this serpent motif, and that basically got removed, and now they're just like mercenaries with a snake theme in their code names. That's the only thing that's left. But if he was just fighting them, right? If there was some kind of conspiracy to kind of undermine the adamantium thing, I think that would have worked a lot better. But making him fight a villain that does not match his story is like the big sin. And that is like one of these bookkeeping issues that this movie has, where this is more about accounting, like an accounting exercise for the MCU than anything else. Where it's a sequel to, let's count the ways in which it's a sequel. It's a sequel to Incredible Hulk. It's a sequel to Eternals. It's a kind of a follow-on to Black Panther, right? Because it kind of deals with how vibranium is becoming obsolete, and we're kind of dropping Wakanda is irrelevant after this, right? As soon as adamantium is in people's hands, who cares about vibranium, right? And it's also a sequel, a sequel and soft remake of the Falcon and Winter Soldier show, because we can't ignore that it happened, but we have to assume that nobody saw it because not many people did, and so we have to follow up from that, but we have to recap it in a way that is not extremely obvious, although it is. Right? Did I miss anything?
No, you got, yeah, that's all of it.
Pretty much, right? Also, they try to move the status quo forward through the whole adamantium thing. That's kind of related to the Eternal being in an Eternal sequel, but it's also meant to usher in the next age of the MCU, right? Where the rules are different, and you can imagine like 5 movies from now, adamantium should be everywhere, right? Adamantium-based tech should be everywhere, and the world should be unrecognizable, and that basically makes everything that came before it obsolete, on paper at least. Right, and that is that's the brave new world that's coming, and that's kind of in the way in which this is a new start, or it's maybe the prologue to a new start. But all of this fights each other. Like none of this actually works together. None of this is actually harmonized, and none of it is about Sam Wilson. It's the other thing. Sam Wilson has nothing to do with any of this.
He's just kind of thrust in there just because of Isaiah Bradley and his relationship to him and him being locked up.
Yeah, and like that way, it's kind of like that's. I think like that's kind of what I included under being a sequel to Winter Soldier and Falcon, right? Because although I didn't see that show, I think Isaiah Bradley appears in that show, right? But they kind of have to recap his story because general audiences don't know who he is. And he's not actually all that important, although he kind of is. He kind of takes the place of Bucky in that Sam goes rogue for him to redeem him, but then doesn't really tie into the bigger story either. So that's the big way in which the story is broken, I think. And it kind of has to do with the story being kind of in between phases and being reworked multiple times, and then being like they want the street cred of being about important things, right? We have 2 black Captain Americas in this fighting the president. How do you not say something with that?
They don't say anything with anything at all that's related to Sam, because there's so many elements of his character that you could have like explored a little bit deeper. The whole wanting to take the super soldier serum or not, like the whole debate about that. Again, of course, the most obvious thing is, you know, being a black Captain America in America and how sort of that goes. The whole, you know, the weight of the shield and whether he's sort of accepted by others. Because like the whole like he's going to return in Avengers Doomsday. I can't even like picture how the other Avengers, I don't even know who the other Avengers are, but I can't picture how a Thor or a Doctor Strange or someone would kind of like interact with him, or how he could potentially be the leader of that team, because one, it's not established enough in his own movie that's kind of like leading up to the Avengers movie coming out. And 2, he's a regular, like the whole like him fighting the Hulk was ridiculous. And I tried to obviously think about Batman, because we saw a similar situation in Batman vs Superman, where you had Superman and Wonder Woman included in the fight, and then you had Batman there. But I can't really remember him like even kind of trying to go toe to toe with Doomsday. He was pretty much just trying to get out of the way, because he's just a regular guy fighting this like almost like godlike creature. So it poses like real big questions as to how someone like Sam Wilson could even not be part of the team, because you had Natasha and you had Clint in there, but how he could be someone that's leading all of these other sort of superpowered beings. It kind of doesn't make sense to me. And again, it's not explored enough in this movie as to how he could potentially be that person, or how he establishes himself as sort of that leader role, essentially. So there's just so many missed opportunities in terms of just doing a good character study or a good sort of deep dive into the psyche of him in this movie. Yeah, and it just doesn't explore any real themes. And I think you hit the nail on the head as well when you said about how the villain has absolutely nothing to do with Captain America at all. That's potentially why they maybe pivoted to having the Red Hulk in this as well, or maybe he was kind of like always part of the plan. But I mean, the leader's whole motif and the leaders, or I don't know if they officially call him the leader in this, or if they call him by like Stein or something like that. But his whole motif is to kind of get back at President Ross. And at least with Zemo in Civil War, he had a strong dislike for the heroes based on what they had done. I can't remember exactly what his motif was.
His
or whatever.
family died as collateral damage in Age of Ultron, and essentially blamed them for not having saved everybody. Essentially,
So the leader's almost similar to him, basically, in terms of trying to manipulate things from the shadows, but there isn't enough involvement in Sam Wilson or Captain America's story in this, or sort of enough motivation for the leader to have a significant impact on him. So it completely makes him fall flat, and it almost makes sense as to why he's essentially not cut out of the movie, but he's not really in it this much. He's not really that much of a presence in this. So yeah, it's just too many missed opportunities, too many things not said.
I did actually kind of find a theme that justifies the Red Hulk a little bit. A lot of the criticism of this movie comes down to all the marketing is about Red Hulk, and Red Hulk appears only in the final sequence. And this is a sequel to a 17-year-old movie that kind of had been soft retconned out of the MCU, and now it's back for some reason. And I think there is actually a way to kind of make sense of this, and that is that we've said in the past that Captain America tends to be about America in some way, right? Like Steve Rogers specifically is about what America wants to be. So the question then is, in what way is Sam Wilson America, right? And the thing I came up with is that it's about fresh starts and it's about moving on, right? So Ross has this history of doing extreme things and questionable things in order to fight the superhuman problem, right? That was his role in Civil War when he was behind the raft in the Sokovian Accords, and that is was his role in fighting the Hulk and creating the Abomination to fight the Hulk and the Incredible Hulk, stuff like that, right? And he legitimately wants to move on and wants to be better than that, and he wants to turn over a new leaf and move forward, because dwelling on the past does not help anybody, right? Like, that's his idea, right? And then we've got Isaiah is an example of how America used to be, right? In the sense that they locked him up in a prison for 30 years and experimented on him, but they could not let him just walk around and be free, right? Like, he did the same thing that Steve Rogers did, which was go rogue in Korea to save some people. Apparently this is outlined in the show, which I haven't watched, but in the movie they recap it. And where Steve Rogers was a hero, he was a criminal, and he got locked up and experimented on for 30 years. And so America treated Isaiah Bradley completely differently from the way they treat Sam Wilson. Now, part of this is also that Sam Wilson is like, there's nothing to him, like, in the sense of, like, maybe this is in the show, but in the movie nobody reacts to the fact that there's a black Captain America, right? Because they're too afraid of saying the wrong thing in that context. But still, even within the logic of the movie, it's not the 50s anymore, right? America has in fact changed since the 50s when it comes to this. So that is another example of moving forward and leaving the past behind you, right? I think I had another example of this. Oh, and the third way in which we are moving forward, leaving the past behind, is adamantium. Adamantium is the chance at a fresh start. It's a chance at a reset. It's a chance at building a new future that is not held back by what came before, right? So this whole idea of moving forward and leaving the past behind you is something that is baked into the story, right? I think it gets drowned out by other stuff, but I do think it's in there. And I think if you're gonna do that, then having Thaddeus Ross as the president who turns into a Hulk makes sense. Like, people complain about why is a Hulk villain in my Captain America movie? But actually, if you pick that theme as what the movie is about, then Thaddeus Ross trying to escape his past and the past catching up with him and turning him into a monster because of things he did in the past while he's trying to outrun the past and failing, and that's what turns him into a villain. Call me crazy, but that's a cool story. Mm-hmm. And I wish they made a movie about that story.
Yeah.
Am I crazy?
No, actually, what you pointed out there was pretty good observation, actually, because there are a lot of sort of examples of that. And again, I think
you could have told that story much better, or could have expressed that theme in much better ways. Like I saw this on another podcast. So this is not my idea, but what if Thaddeus Ross is the hero and Hulk is the villain? Where Thaddeus Ross is trying to get Sam Wilson into the position where he can't stop the Red Hulk, because he knows the Red Hulk will come out at some point, and when he does, Sam Wilson has to be in position. That's the conspiracy. That is why all these mysterious things happen. It turns out that the conspirator is Ross, and Ross is doing these things because he knows he's going to be the villain, because sooner or later the Hulk will take over. Wouldn't that have been cool?
That would have been cool, yeah. Because then they could have sprinkled in Ross doing some type of shady things in there as well to mislead the audience as well, to not make us think that he's just this old man trying to turn a new leaf. Because that was my biggest issue with him in the movie, was that it seemed like it was very obvious that he was a good guy in this, and it felt very obvious that he was trying to do right. And it was a bit like you have the situation where you're meant to have some element of mistrust, because again, this person has done so many things that have caused harm to Sam Wilson specifically, like him directly. It's he's done so many things that have affected him and impacted him negatively. So there will be that level of mistrust, and us as the audience, we have to be going on that journey with Sam Wilson in terms of us having that same level of mistrust for Thunderbolt Ross in this, to make the story a little bit more believable and a little bit more entertaining, and a little bit more complex, and just a little bit less predictable than what it was. It would have been very cool. So that idea of Thunderbolt being the one that's conspiring to get Sam in the right position to deal with him, then that would have been great. That would have been a shock reveal, and everyone would have been
yeah. That would have actually been something that people were saying, "Well, I didn't see that coming." Because Ross is not a sympathetic character, right? He's usually the guy who's trying to lock people up or is trying to like prevent the heroes from doing their thing, right? And what if he had come to a place where he had to defer to them because he realizes that's the only way? And then the entire thing gets undone because guess what happens to Ross? He gets locked up in the raft for being a danger to society because he is the Hulk. Isn't that undermining the entire point of the story? That Ross was right from the start. That like back in Incredible Hulk and back in Civil War, Ross was correct because some people just need to be locked up. Isn't that how this movie ends?
Yeah, true.
Are we not undermining that by locking Ross up and both Sam and Ross agreeing that this is what needs to be done? Sam agrees that the raft needs to exist in the end, doesn't he?
Which is wild. Which is wild. I mean, it depends on like who they're putting in there, basically, and what they're using it for.
What's the difference between Ross and like rogue Avengers who are wrecking the Vienna airport over a personal grievance? Isn't that the same thing?
Not much, to be fair. I forgot about that when they were just like chucking
right?
cars.
No, like they wreck the place because they disagree over a personal vendetta, which is specifically what to do about Bucky, given that he killed Stark's parents. That's what they're fighting over in Civil War. It's a personal issue. It's a gang war.
That was before he found out. So I think at that point it was about the Sokovia Accords.
I thought they sorted into teams based on that.
No, it was based on the Sokovia Accords first, and then like later on in the movie when it's just like Cap, Iron Man, and Bucky. That's when he discovers that Bucky actually killed his parents. Yeah,
I'd have to rewatch it in which order it happens, but still, it's a turf war between two groups of superhumans, right? And isn't that is there a real difference between that and the Red Hulk, like from society's point of view? I
mean, by the end of the movie as well, before he gets locked up, it seemed like there was some level of like consciousness within there, because Sam Wilson gave the worst speech to kind of convince him to actually calm down and not go on this rampage, and him in his Hulk form listened and understood. So it was a bit like, okay, maybe he had this under control, but the whole, unless you're saying like it's just popped into mind, unless you're saying that he was in there for the bad things he was doing to the leader and having him like locked up, and maybe like all of the shady things that kind of like came with that potentially, because I don't know.
I don't think he was serving a prison sentence for the specific things he did. I think he was locked up because being the Hulk means he's a danger to society. Yeah, I don't think there was. I did not get the sense that there was a court trial involved and that he was actually sentenced to some time and that he would eventually be free once he served his time. No, he's just, by existing, he's dangerous to society and therefore needs to be locked up. And that was Ross's position from the start. And that's what made him a villain. And now the hero agrees with him, right?
I have no defense of that. For the movie, anyways, I've got no defense of that. That's egregious.
Yeah, so it's like I'm sure that's not the point they're making, but like this is what happens when you don't examine your themes. This is what happens when you have like fragments and you don't like think things through. I don't know. Like it just like by that point I was like, are you kidding me? This is how you end your movie? And it's like, not only does it not have much to do with Sam's arc, like to the extent that he has one. I don't think we are told repeatedly about what a great leader he is and about how he brings out the best in people. But aside from just basic protagonist stuff, we never really see him do it. Right? Yeah. We do see it a little bit. We've got his Falcon sidekick, and he's got the big speech when he tries to talk down the Hulk. But like as a person, in terms of how he fits into the story, he did not seem to be that much of a leader.
That was the other thing that I didn't quite get with him, because there was like that whole speech between him and Bucky about how in his position of like kind of him not having the super soldier serum is not causing, but because he doesn't have it, he's not able to protect the people that's around him. And again, that's like another interesting theme that you can explore there. It's like someone that was a sidekick before and is now having to step up in a leadership position, and kind of has a responsibility over the people that he's bringing into the situation that he's involved in. That would have been like another, again, interesting thing to explore, but instead we're just told how he feels in that particular moment, which goes by the wayside.
And like we just watched Winter Soldier just a few weeks ago, and there he's a really cool character, right? He's kind of like the empathetic counselor who kind of is able to connect with people and who gives Steve Rogers advice on how to live, essentially, right? How to function as a soldier coming home from war and stuff like that. And he actually proactively like runs this veterans group, and he basically supports Steve, not because he's a follower exactly, but because he's convinced of Steve's cause, and he is willing to do what he can, even though he doesn't have any superpowers, to make sure that the right thing gets done, right? That's a much more interesting character than whatever this was. Like, honestly, I think the guy is kind of a shadow of his former self. It's quite amazing.
It's a shame as well because, again, like you said, you could tell he really tried, because this is his first sort of leading role, and even kind of stuff outside of the movies. Seeing him appearing at like movie theaters and stuff like that, really trying to make an effort to like connect with the audience for this. And of course, it's not the first time that it's been done before, but you could see the extra like care and like love that he like wanted to sort of show the character. And it was just let down by poor writers and poor directors all throughout this, because there is something there with him, but it's just not been examined. It's just not been well developed, which is very unfortunate. And just kind of like the last point on him, for me, he needs to take that super soldier serum, man. Like I can't have him like running around in his like Falcon suit, whatever, tanking hits from like the worst one was when the Hulk was swinging the flagpole from the White House, was swinging at him, and he was able to like stop it with his hand, and just the thrusters of his Falcon suit, or his like, I don't know if he calls it the Falcon suit anymore, but basically his Falcon suit, he was able to stop it with his hand and the Falcon suit, just because. And I was like, okay, like everything else, I was a bit like, okay, maybe that. I was like, the Hulk would have completely wiped you out. Like the Hulk would have hit you like a baseball bat there, and you would have been flying like that. I can take that one.
Yeah, Tony Stark had to, in order to fight a Hulk, had to build a dedicated armor and had to like leverage like all of his ingenuity just to not instantly die.
Yeah.
Right, and Sam Wilson just does it. Is that a good story? And if he does take the super soldier serum after this, so like first of all, I miss the times when Hulk was scary. Like in Avengers, every interaction he has with other people, and people are scared of the Hulk. Like that initial scene where he's hiding in India, like working in like a charity clinic, people are scared of him. And Black Widow is like, that's the only time Black Widow has ever been scared, right? Remember that scene where she's sent to retrieve him, right? Because putting together a team. Can we get more Hulk like this, right? Like that is actually has impact and scale and weight, as opposed to just being a big dude. I don't know, I don't see how this is interesting. And then if he does take the super soldier serum for the next movie, isn't that defeat? Isn't that like for Sam Wilson? Because his entire thing in this movie was, I can be Captain America without being a super soldier, without having superpowers. And then if he does take the serum next time, isn't that admitting that he can't?
Yeah, and at least with Batman, I know he doesn't kind of always go up against these sort of these godly creatures.
Batman is at least a tactician and a planner, and he does other things, right? He does not arm wrestle Thanos, right? He does other things, and some versions of this do this better than others, but like in a good Justice League story will find things to do for Batman, and usually means infiltrating something, sneaking to the right place, coming up with a battle plan that the others can execute, being a leader, something, right?
Yeah.
Paying the bills is a big one. But if you're at a point where Batman has to put on the power armor and has to fight a dude, that's no longer a Batman story, really. And you've kind of admitted defeat as a writer, because you couldn't come up with a scenario that actually fits the character. And I can totally see Falcon or Captain America in an Avengers story. And I can even see him as a leader if it's written in a way where he actually brings out the best in everybody. He actually holds the team together. Like Steve Rogers was not the strongest Avenger, but he was still the leader, because he kept the team together and he directed their capabilities and power in a way that it got the job done. I can be on board in principle with Sam Wilson doing the same thing, and he does not need to be a super soldier to do this. But then you need to put him in stories where that fits, like where he fits that story and the story fits him. And this movie just did not do this.
How does he recover from this in the next couple of movies? Because of course he's going to appear in Avengers Doomsday, and of course this is kind of part of what we're talking about. But one positive for him is that he's away from these writers and directors, because I believe these were the same people that did the Falcon and Winter Soldier show, which was really poorly received, and I think he's now moving into the hands of the Russo brothers, who of course did Captain America, Winter Soldier, Civil War, and of course the Avengers movie as well. So they do have experience with Captain America. So there is potential in there for them to kind of take this character and redefine him and rework him a little bit. And it wouldn't be the first time this has happened, because I'm trying to remember which character it was where they kind of gave him just like, I'm not going to find the example off the top of my head. Which character was it? That's annoying. They were just like tweaks to the character in the Avengers movie compared to like their own personal movie. But I can't remember which character it was off the top of my head or whatever. Kind of stepping into the Avengers world anyways. It's just a good opportunity for him and for Marvel to just add another, like, especially if he's meant to be one of the leaders, which means he should be kind of like front and center, or part of sort of the forefront of the movie. It's just a good way to give him a little bit more to his character. And I mean at that point they've already missed the mark on exploring the parts of the character which should have been explored in his own personal movie, in terms of like the conflicts and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, now you have to find something new and you have to find something interesting to give him. And that's where I'm struggling a little bit as to how do you then define, like, what's his like next defining thing? Like, what's the next logical step for this Sam Wilson character in the next sort of the set of movies that he appears in?
I don't think it's going to be like, what I'm about to say might be a bit wild, but I think his character is not necessarily going to have an effect on the like broader MCU narrative. I think it's a thing where his character is going to be like a forgotten character. So he's going to be treated again like a sidekick, but I don't think it's going to affect like the future storylines for the MCU or other characters. I think what they need to do is kind of like rely on the other characters to kind of like revive his character again, because he's going to be the leader, right? But I think he's going to be like a player manager in a sense where he's going to have definitely like an influence and a positive impact on the other characters. Like his character's not going to be like the main focus. He's still going to be pretty much treated like the sidekick character. I think that's the only way that they can go about it, because I think it's similar to like because like his impact, like what his impact has done is kind of similar to like Kang, like what Ant-Man done to Kang, in the sense where it kind of like ruined the whole fear factor and the power level of Kang, because obviously he was defeated by Ant-Man. So everyone's wondering, okay, where the hell does Kang go from here now? Now they're gonna kind of find a way. I don't know how they're gonna kind of end Kang's. I don't know how they're gonna end Kang's storyline, but I'm pretty sure they're gonna be like the other characters within the MCU is gonna kind of like overlap and overshadow his story. So I think that's going to happen the same with Captain America, where he's just going to be a forgotten character that's going to be kind of like overshadowed by the acts and kind of the storylines of the other MCU characters now.
But the problem for Marvel at the moment is that they don't have enough characters. Like it seems like every character that they have at the moment isn't hitting or isn't sticking the way that it should. Like, again, if I ask you to name who should be on the Avengers team with sort of kind of like what's remaining, the only ones that I can kind of think of are like Doctor Strange or Thor.
Spider-Man.
I mean, yeah, Spider-Man, yeah, and Spider-Man as well.
Well, they're bringing back people. They're bringing back people. And in terms of like them building a roster, you are right. But they are bringing back people. And we obviously, with the whole like Doctor Doom storyline, I'm sure it's going to be like 50-50. I personally think it's going to be a thing where they're going to bring back a lot of old characters as well as introduce new characters. The characters so far, like now, don't really hold that much weight, as in like there's not really that much interest around them, which I do agree with. But I think they're going to be kind of like reliant on the old, like on the past with this one.
Yeah, they just don't have that many characters who you like that are actually popular and have actually been built up. Like Sam Wilson was supposed to be one of them, and that's kind of whatever now. And honestly, like all of this is, I think, is only a problem because it's kind of preordained that he is supposed to be the leader, right? Because like originally it was supposed to be Black Panther, and then Chadwick Boseman. Is it Boseman?
Boseman.
Then Chadwick Boseman died, which obviously was outside anybody's control. And then they tried to make Captain Marvel the leader, and she was rejected by audiences broadly. And then next up is Sam Wilson, and Disney just squandered their big chance to make people care about him. So there's basically there's not much left. There's not much of a roster. It's basically Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, and then a couple of D-listers. It's kind of what it amounts to. But I think all of this is just a problem in terms of Sam Wilson being a leader. It's because we've decided that he has to be the leader. I think if he actually said, okay, I'm not actually the leader, I'm the enabler. It's kind of along the lines of what you said, that he basically says, I am here to support the best heroes, the best Avengers, but I can't actually lead them for whatever reason. I just think they can't do it because there's no way that Disney would actually make that decision with this character. There's no way. Everybody's just gonna pretend that he's the leader, and it's gonna fall flat, and then people are gonna wonder why. I think that's what that ultimately has to be, because there's no way in which they actually kind of put him on an arc where a Captain America decides he does not or maybe should not be a leader, maybe for whatever reason, right? I don't think that there even is anything fundamental about his character other than from the start he's been about helping people as opposed to necessarily being a leader. They could have turned him into a leader, and I just think they didn't, and therefore it seems a bit it seems a bit weak to make him now the leader of the Avengers, especially since that puts him in the direct, half of Sam Wilson's problem is being in direct comparison to Steve Rogers, probably the biggest or second biggest success of the MCU. If he was any other character, if he was just Falcon, I don't think any of this would be a problem. It's just there because they made him Captain America, and because by context and in the story, they're constantly invoking Steve Rogers. And that Sam Wilson just does not look good next to Steve Rogers.
But to be fair, he does kind of constantly counter that argument by kind of saying, well, with the title Brave New World, and obviously him continuously countering that he's not Steve Rogers, that kind of does imply that, okay, this is a new world, new Captain America. So you could argue and say that is pretty much invoked.
Well, yeah, but they are invoking the comparison, and that's a losing game, and they don't have to do it. But now it's too late. It's just my thing. That cat is out of the bag. If he had just been Falcon the entire time and they had just made Falcon movies, none of this would be an issue.
They could kind of turn him into a Nick Fury, but with more.
Yeah, but that's not what they're doing. He has to be the leader.
Yeah,
that's the problem. I'm just saying there's no scenario in which Disney actually kind of takes the consequences of this and said, no, he is not in fact the leader. He's more of a Nick Fury character. I agree that would make sense, but I'm just saying there's 0% chance that Disney will do it.
But I actually think they might though.
They said in this movie, Sam, I need you to bring the Avengers together. That implies that he is going to be the leader of the Avengers. Even when they said it in the movie, I was like, I don't even know how they believe he has that type of pulling power, because he's never had that status. I don't know how they think he has that pulling power to bring this group of Avengers together. I don't know who the Avengers are, essentially, but they are purposely setting him up to be the leader of the Avengers by asking him to put them together.
By the way, I'm just giving them the benefit of the doubt, but I think they might. No, I know that they'll make him the leader, but I think they might go with the whole Nick Fury storyline in terms of, because they continuously. No, but I say that because they continue to tell us that this guy, he has limitations. He's not like Steve Rogers continuously. So they should, if they're telling us this, they're surely going to say, okay, we're going to utilize on that and bring it into the Avengers in terms of that's because they've shown us his character. This guy, he's
that would be a good story choice. And what now that you mention it, he's like Nick Fury, but without the secrecy and without the lies. Isn't that a cool place to put a character?
Yeah.
Right? But they're not doing it. They're setting it up as the next Steve Rogers. That is immutable. That will not change. And I think we all agree that that's a mistake. But the character would be much better off as a Nick Fury stand-in, or as the next Nick Fury as opposed to the next Steve Rogers. But that ship has sailed. That ship sailed years ago.
Well, do you honestly think that? Because think about it. Remember the scene that, the last scene that he had against Hulk, when he stopped Hulk by talking to him. So surely that should tell us that that's going to pretty much be his power and his influence when it comes to uniting the Avengers. It's going to be, I'm saying, through his.
There was no other way for him to stop the Hulk, to be fair. There,
Huh?
there was no
Yeah, of
other way for
course.
him to stop the
But
Hulk.
that's another way of Marvel telling us, look, this guy's limited, but this is going to be his power. And even the conversation that we had with Bucky, like he was telling Bucky that, oh, listen, I ain't like Steve Rogers. Bucky was saying, listen, you got his strength. However, you've got that leadership quality. And he showed that leadership quality when he was talking to Hulk. So I think the Captain America, what they're gonna do is he's pretty much his power is gonna be him with his profound speeches. You know what I'm saying? Like literally his
Yeah.
motivational speeches.
They're gonna have him like what's that guy from Rebel Moon? Is it Titus or something like that? The guy that was just like making random speeches all throughout
Yeah.
Rebel Moon 2 that made no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
Just like
So-
incoherent, like randomly breaking out in speech.
By the way, I'm not saying that is a good. I'm not saying that's great. Like this is gonna be. I'm not saying that's like a good idea or anything. I'm just saying for me that's the only way that they can go because like you set this guy up to fail, especially with the series where you just pretty much. I haven't seen the series, but I'm guessing a whole chunk of his story was in the series, and pretty much what you set out for him is setting it up to fail. So there's no other way because he's not gonna want. I don't see him taking the serum. Ends up taking. Imagine if he ends up taking the serum in the next movie. How would you guys feel about that?
Well, as I said earlier, it would be defeat because he's been arguing he doesn't need it, and if he does need it, then that means he's lost.
Honestly, it's such a wild decision why they wouldn't give it to him. Honestly, like throughout the whole movie, I was just like kind of hoping he got hurt so bad that someone decided to just give it to him.
But they didn't want him to be the same as the old Captain America because they're pushing this whole new, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
They're pushing the whole new world, new Captain America. So yeah.
How do you guys feel? How do you guys feel about him having like these wings and like flying all over the place as Captain America? Because for me, again, I know he's like a different iteration of Captain America, but it just almost kind of like defeats the whole, especially if you're not giving him a story that sort of warrants Captain, like someone being Captain America, and again, sort of the whole like reflecting what America is and this, that, and the other. If you're not going to give him that type of story as well, then at least have him like kind of be a little bit like Captain America in terms of like the fighting and stuff like that. And I know they tried to with the hand-to-hand combat that they did at the start of the movie, but it was just a bit, I don't know, man.
He's technically like another Iron Man, but unfinished Iron Man, which is why I wasn't like his character didn't really do much for me. It was like just half man, half robot, and I was like, firstly, like it doesn't really fall in like it kind of like derives from the identity of Captain America, Steve Rogers, Captain America. Like this is like it would have made sense if he was trying to be another Iron Man because, like I said, he's half man, half robot in a way because he's relying on gadgets. But him kind of being like Steve Rogers' offspring is like it doesn't really connect well with me. There's like your identity doesn't really mesh well with saying Steve Rogers as Captain America, so it feels completely it doesn't work well with me.
Him being Captain America is kind of a technicality at this point. Like I always felt like the shield is kind of tagged on. I don't know, he feels much more at home with like doing the wings and the wing-based martial arts and acrobatics and firing guns and hand-to-hand combat. Like that's where the character makes more sense to me. It seems like him using the same fighting techniques as Steve Rogers seems a bit tacked on, maybe. They can't really. It doesn't feel really organic. It doesn't feel like what Sam Wilson would do. It feels like he learned to do this because that's expected of Captain America.
Yeah, I mean, even there was like one scene where he like stepped on the shield or something like that, and it raised up, and he kicked it at someone, and it did the whole rebound thing, and I was like, oh.
And it was about 80% as cool as when Steve Rogers did it, right?
Yeah.
Like Steve Rogers did the same move, like step on the side of the shield, and it flips up and it lands on his arm. Put those two next to each other, and Sam Wilson doesn't quite do it as cool. Yeah. And if you're gonna do that, then maybe find his own thing to do. Like the adamantium wings or the vibranium wings, where he uses them to slice stuff and stuff like that. That's something that no other MCU character does, right? Quite in the same way. Iron Man doesn't do it. The other characters don't do it. Like that is what's unique about Falcon. And so, like, I honestly had a better time when he was using his wings to fight as opposed to the shield. And it's kind of part of the identity crisis, I think. It just feels a little bit obligatory where we took this step 5 years ago and we can't really undo it. And nobody wants to be the person to undo it. And everybody is kind of invested in making this work. But it does not quite work. And it feels a little bit artificial. It's like he's wearing a costume, like somebody else's costume, not his own. Isn't it? And I'm not saying he should be a Captain America or anything like it's not about I want Bucky as Captain America or anything like that. It's more like, is this character best served by being Captain America? And honestly, I think as a story beat, if he goes back to being Falcon, that would be kind of a cool place, right? What's the story of somebody who was Captain America and walked away from it because he could do more good this way? Isn't that a story?
Yeah, it would have been cool if he actually dropped the shield, just like left the shield and says, I'm saying I'm going to be the Falcon. It's kind of like the new world, new story. That would have been cool, in my opinion.
Do you want to know again how they didn't define his character in this movie, or they didn't give him enough kind of development as well, is his suit. Because and I think there's like maybe like one or two suit changes in this, and none of them mean anything. None of them like are for any particular reason. It's just he's in a new situation, and I can't even remember why he pulled out the second suit for that last fight or whatever. But it's just like
that is when he goes rogue, right? When he goes off on his own investigation that's unsanctioned. And that is a little bit like what Steve Rogers did, right? Like when he goes off script, when he goes against SHIELD orders, he puts down the SHIELD uniform, he puts on his old World War II uniform. It's fine. It's nothing special, but it's fine.
But to me, it's like, how does that define him and his character? Like, how does that, like, what is he representing at that point? Like, because obviously the suit is the American flag, basically. Like, what does that mean to him? Like, I don't know. There just isn't anything iconic about it. Like, if you compare it to like Into the Spider-Verse, for example, when Miles Morales, I don't know if you guys have seen it, the animated Spider-Man movie, but he kind of goes through all these like trials and tribulations, whether he's kind of like even good enough to be Spider-Man, and the moment that he's like finally takes that leap or whatever, he spray paints, like it's within his character, because he's like you've seen him like spray paint stuff like that, and he's done it with his uncle and whatever, and in that he defined his own look, his own sort of suit by like spray painting it and like having his own character design to it, and like it just felt like there was just like something, because I feel like the suits are sort of symbolic and they're iconic to sort of the hero, and I just felt like, especially if you want to differentiate him to what Steve Rogers was and you want to kind of like move it forward or whatever, it just needed to mean a little bit more to him as opposed to just being another Captain America suit with Ant-Man helmet and wings.
There's certainly not much going on, right? It is again, he's going off script, he's going against orders. But it's like the fourth time a Captain America has done this. Like, nothing wrong with it, but also nothing where I go, oh, that's cool. And it's kind of what everything about this is, right? Like, everything is kind of like, I've seen this better, right? Like, even like the fight sequence in the monastery at the beginning, a little bit tired, a little bit slow, a little bit predictable. Nothing where I said, okay, now you're trying. Put that next to Winter Soldier, or really any of the other top, like even like was it Civil War at the beginning, like where somebody's trying to steal the sample from a lab in Nigeria. Was that Civil War? That's a very cool action sequence where everybody is firing on all cylinders, everybody is doing their unique part, everybody is contributing something, and it's a great sequence, and it takes and like. They work together, and it's doing this classic superhero thing of they're combining their powers in order to do things they can't do on their own, and all of that. Nothing like that here.
In the Avengers movie, they need to give him the Thor moment, that in Infinity War, when Thor lands in Wakanda and he starts like wrecking stuff, and then he has that line of like, "Bring me Thanos." That I was like, Thor was like my favorite Avenger for about like one movie, and then they brought out Endgame and turned him to a fat boy, and then they brought out like Love and Thunder, and it was just a bit like, okay, cool, you completely killed the character at that point. But in that particular moment, because like Thor was like never really like, my guy, but then in Infinity War, when he had like that power scale and he had like that action moment, I was like, okay, cool, like we're doing something like really cool with this character. So he needs something like that in the Avengers movie. He needs a set piece moment where you're like, okay, cool, this is like, I can see the vision here.
Yeah, it needs to be something that only Falcon can do. It needs to be something that is significant in some way, on a character level, on a choreography level, like something that sticks out, something that is not simply the same thing over and over again. Yeah. There's one more topic I wanted to get to before we wrap up, and that is that this movie has no world building. So specifically, what is the MCU like in 2025. So basically it looks exactly like the real world. There's nothing, there's no technology in the background. There's nothing. Like holograms are a little bit more advanced than they are in our world, right? When Ross gives his like big presentation to the other countries, those holograms are a little bit more advanced, but not much, right? Certainly nothing that Tony Stark couldn't do 15 years ago. But so there's nothing like the Secret Service doesn't have any force fields, right? Like Ross doesn't carry personal force fields. Just as an example of something that might happen in this world, there's nothing to indicate that superheroes have been running around for 20 years. When Ross turns into the Red Hulk, nobody has anti-Hulk tactics. They just shoot him. Just stand 5 meters away and just shoot him with pistols. After 20 years of the Hulk and beings like the Hulk being on Earth, the White House does not have anti-Hulk measures. If this was some shopping center somewhere, then I understand that the security guards aren't prepared. Are you telling me that the White House has no anti-Hulk countermeasures, and the Secret Service does not drill on what to do when like super beings attack?
The fact that they're still using handguns is insane. Considering everything that's happened, at this point in the MCU, the alien invasion that happened in the original Avengers movie happened years ago, and then even
almost
in that movie,
20 years.
Almost 20 years ago,
2008, isn't it? No, 2010, 2010.
2010. I think
So we call it 15 years. Everything should be built around what happens if a being like Hulk or Thor or Vision or Thanos lands on the White House lawn and starts picking fights. There should be plans, even if it means evacuating everybody and running until the Avengers show up. But like it should be built into into the tactics.
And it's like, do you know what the worst thing is? Is that in Spider-Man, is it Homecoming or whatever? They showed these street level thugs having these advanced weapons because of because of the alien tech of the Chitauri. So if these street level thugs were able to like harness it and convert it to that, because as you were saying, I was like, wouldn't they have like access to alien tech? There's been enough like alien beings that have like traveled into the Earth, and they would have been like enough like sort of wreckage and stuff like that, or alien technology that's been about. It's like, wouldn't they have like started to make use of it at some point or whatever? And like they've done it in a smaller movie.
Here's another one. A villain is mind controlling people to assassinate the president, and nobody knows what to do. Loki did this 15 years ago. People should know that mind control exists and have countermeasures. Even like I can come up with a protocol right now for how to handle mind control. Yeah, like you do it by like nobody does anything alone. There's like mechanisms for reporting people acting erratically. Like there wasn't even a scene where they know what the trigger word is, and they do not test anybody. They just shout it out and hope it goes well. That's the only time they do something about it. It's like when they are when Falcon and Cap are with the mercenaries, or with, I don't even know who they were. But they said, hey, by the way, the villain is using Winter Soldier tech to mind control people to assassinate the president. Anybody could have been turned. And we know what the code word is. And one guy just shouts out the code word. And when nobody turns into a murder machine, he says, I think we're good. Here's what you do, right? You clear one person at a time, and the person being tested is restrained in a chair with no weapons. And then you slowly screen people. And next time we see Ross, there should be an entire testing regime for ensuring that nobody who is close to the president can be mind controlled. Because they've already tried to kill him once.
Bear in mind, this is also the president that in the original Incredible Hulk movie was building anti-Hulk technology. He was like kind of like the leader of that. So it's like, would he as president not have those kind of countermeasures available? Whether you kind of think they're good or bad or whatever, he's a person that understands the danger and the threat of it. Clearly, he would be the one that would have countermeasures.
Yeah. And so here's why it's matters, right? The whole appeal, the reason we are on board with this in the first place is the shared universe. This idea that facts carry over from one movie to the next, and events in one movie have ramifications in the next. And all of these characters live in the same world. They know about each other, they interact with each other, they react to each other's actions. And if you're going to do that, you have to show us a world in which people kind of know that superpowers exist. Like, this movie is written like it's the first, like in those respects, it's written as if this was the first time somebody had used superpowers. Like, these should be just a fact of daily life. Like, this should be something, especially when you're like protecting the president or something, this should be something you have, like, you're working into your tactics and into your precautions and into how you work. And it should have, like, at this point, 17 years in, it should have permeated every aspect of society, and it should be especially visible in the circles we see in this movie. And nothing exists. It's lazy and it's stupid. And it squanders every advantage. Like, this might as well not be a shared universe. Like what's the point? If we are not depicting characters who have lived in this universe in which crazy stuff like this has been happening for 17 years, what's the point? Why is this a shared universe? Why do we care? And if they don't care, why should we?
Hey, this is hopefully the last of the Bad Batch of Marvel movies, because I think this was like the last remnant of when they had like the mandate of make as many Marvel movies and TV shows as quick as possible. I think it's like the last one before like they kind of like wrestle back control on the creative side of things. Let's just hope the next couple are. And again, like I think we've completely like hammered this movie, but I still enjoyed myself kind of like watching it. Like I know it was like kind of a bit crap, and I'm not saying it was like top tier MCU, but it's a superhero movie. I'm kind of predisposed to liking that genre anyways, so I can like make a few like extra exceptions for this movie than I would for other movies and enjoy it a little bit more just because it's a superhero movie. In that sense, like I know the movie was completely broken and there was like so many things that just like didn't work in it or whatever. But let's just hope that the upcoming schedule is a lot better. I'm a little bit iffy on Thunderbolt. I don't know why everyone thinks that looks amazing for whatever reason. To me, it looks like a bunch of like annoying characters like the Red Guardian and Yelena and stuff like that I've like not liked in any other projects, and they're just kind of like more front and center, which is going to be interesting to see. But I'm the one I'm looking forward to most is Fantastic Four, and again for me that will be the one that defines where Marvel's at and whether Marvel still has the juice, basically.
I think this was the one I keep giving them chances and they keep disappointing me. Like, Secret Invasion was kind of pitched as the Nick Fury movie, and I said I've always liked Nick Fury. I hope that's good, and it wasn't. Then this is the next Cap movie that's in the spirit of Winter Soldier and Civil War, and it really wasn't. At some point, I'm out of patience. As a universe, I've given up on it like years ago. So like, that ends with Endgame at the latest. And like, they might make good movies on a case-by-case basis going forward. But like, this entire project of a shared universe, of it all matters, it all builds towards something, that's been a farce since after Endgame. And that's 6 years ago now. That's a long time. And that's a long time to get your act together. And it's a long time to kind of flounder around. And all the money and time and effort and creativity that went into making all of these not very good movies, like, at some point it stops being worth it. Like, if it's the occasional misstep, then fine. Like, you can't make 30 movies, whatever, and not make a few that are not that great. That just goes with the territory. But they keep getting chances after chance, and they just keep missing. And I don't think any about this was impossible. Like, we just kept coming up with better ideas. Like, even as I'm watching it, I said, I wish they'd done this other thing, which is really obvious and would have cost the same actors, same amount of CG, whatever. Like, this is not, I'm not asking, like, in my head, I can come up with like what the MCU should be like at this point. And it's very different from what it actually is. I understand that on some level that's wishful thinking. But even our rewrites were just having actors say different lines. If they can't do that, then I don't know what the problem is. I don't know why that's so difficult, and I don't know why we should be invested. Like, my point is, like, I'm not boycotting it. I'm not never watching an MC movie again. But I'm not invested. If the next one is good, that's cool. But that's kind of the amount of investment I have at this point.
Just hire better writers, man. I'm kind of tired of these no-name writers or no-name directors that have like done nothing in the past or like have no experience or whatever, and they've been like thrust onto like these big projects. Even like the whole idea before they changed the writers for like these Avengers movie of having, I can't remember who it was. I think they did like the Multiverse of Madness and whatever, and I was just like, they've like already.
That was Sam Raimi.
No, not the director. Sorry, the writers.
Okay.
But yeah, there was like a few writers. I think it was the writer of Ant-Man and Quantumania that was meant to do an Avengers movie, and I was like, there is no way. I was like, there is no way you can give this person the Avengers movie. So, yeah, let's just hope that they have better ideas, kind of moving forward on that front as well. Last thoughts?
Like I said, I give this one a solid 6. I enjoyed the Act 3. I think it should have been like that throughout. Even though we kind of did outline the inconsistencies, especially with like when in terms of like the whole MCU narrative and just how just with the storyline. But still, I enjoyed the last 20 minutes of it. I think it was I think Sam Wilson's character was kind of set up to fail, mainly because it was missing everything which I'm assuming the series had, in terms of just kind of like setting up his story and turning him from a sidekick to the main character, especially now that he did film to be the leader. So overall, like I said, I give it a success. I had an all right time. It was, like I said, it was a typical Marvel movie, but yeah, so I'm gonna give this one a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I think I'll probably give it the same actually. 6 out of 10. Not as bad as people are saying, but so much more room to be better than what it was. It just felt to deliver on anything really, to be fair, and like it didn't kind of excel in any area of the movie, which is really frustrating because this movie could have had so much more to say. Could have had sort of so much more sort of depth to it. Could have had a little bit more kind of intrigue into sort of the whole like political thriller aspect of it, but it just kind of didn't do what it was meant to do. So on that front, it was a 6. It was like, okay, cool. I watched it. It was fine. It's one of the MCU movies that you like. If I'm doing like a rewatch of the whole MCU, like it's one that I'll like get to, and I won't hate that I've watched it, but it's not one that I'm like looking forward to. Like, yeah, I need to watch this one. So yeah, that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, just for me, the entire thing is just underwhelming and kind of pointless. Too many cooks, too many rewrites, too many reworkings. The opportunity to really establish, like the MCU is short on really good characters with compelling stories, and Sam Wilson was one of the better candidates for that. And they squandered that with this movie. Action is underwhelming. Actually, we didn't even go into how ugly a lot of it is. Like it's downright blurry in many places and just washed out, and it just does not look good. I did not have a good time with it on any level, character, story, spectacle, anything. Everything is too muddled. Everything is too pulled in 5 directions at the same time. It tries to do much and accomplishes nothing. So for that reason, I give it a do better out of 5.
Guys, thank you very much for tuning into today's episode. Heavy.
Let us know your thoughts down below in the comment section. What did you think of the movie? Were you one of the ones that loved it? Did you hate it? Are you kind of somewhere in between like me and Jonathan are? Let us know your thoughts down below. And of course, if you like what we just talked about today, tell a friend. And if you hated everything we discussed today, tell an enemy. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast.
All right, guys. We'll catch you next week. Thank you very much. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.